Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss the legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedoms and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties, education, and legal defense organization. Join us now as Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country. In the courtrooms of America, Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedoms.
The amazing experience of Israel. Hi, I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Today, my guest is Cindy Matthews, and she was with us on our trip to Israel recently. And Cindy, it was an amazing experience. You were there one time before.
Yes.
And this was your second trip to Israel. What did it do for you personally?
It just totally opened up my eyes and impacted my life in a way that it did not the very first visit when I was there back in the early 80s. Obviously, Israel has grown a lot. It's become more commercialized, more people. But not only that, I also saw Scripture in a new light. There were several places that we visited, and our guide shared Old Testament, New Testament scriptures with us that just truly opened up the scriptures for me. It
really was an amazing experience, and part of our Liberty Ambassador Counsel program is designed to increase and strengthen your Christian faith and equip you to become a goodwill ambassador for Israel. So we visit the biblical sites, and we also introduce people to other individuals and leaders within the government and private sector. That is just an amazing experience when you factor all that together. But we went to the northern part of Israel first, up into the Galilee, the Tiberias area, where Jesus performed most of his ministry. We went up to the Golan Heights and looked actually into Syria, which was right there in front of us. And then we went to a place called Caesarea Philippi. Tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Well, that was perhaps one of my most favorite places to visit. It was the early part of our trip, and our guide shared with us that was actually, in Jesus' time, a temple was erected there in worship a god that was known as the god of hell. So when Jesus was standing there with his disciples and asked Peter, "Who do men say that I am?" and Peter's response was, "You are the Son of God." And Jesus' response said, "Yes, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against me." The disciples knew precisely what he was referring to, and I had never known that until we stood there with our guide and saw with my own eyes the temple, the remains of a temple that had been built there, and being able to understand that the people during that time were worshiping a god of hell.
Yeah, you still see the temples that are actually carved into the stone. They are still there, 2,000 plus years old. And this is where Jesus actually said, when Peter made that confession, "You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." And we read that scripture, we move on through it, but for those that understand the history, Jesus was in the epicenter, in the very heart of paganism, pagan worship.
Yes, he was.
And ultimately taking that on and say, upon this confession of Jesus being the Messiah, the Son of the living God, the church will be built, and nothing will prevail against the church, not even the gates of hell.
That's true.
And then one of the other things about Caesarea Philippi is not only that historic moment from a Christian perspective, but also with regards to the 1967 borders. That also played in regards to Syria and the 1967 border issue.
Yes, that's true. And then we left from there and traveled just a few miles to Quinita, which was a post that Professor Alex Bly was responsible for during the 1973 war. And as we stood on that hilltop, just literally miles in front of us, we could see the Syrian border. And I can look out my window here at work. I can stand on my deck here in my home and look at the Blue Ridge Mountains, and a beautiful sight. But to be able to stand there and to know that the enemy border water is just a few miles in front of us really impacted me in being able to understand how imminent that threat is for the nation of Israel.
And Syria was trying to divert the waters
Yes.
coming out of Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi, when you're there, it's a nice, cool, clear stream of water that ultimately feeds into the Jordan River, one of the three rivers that feed into the Jordan River. And this water comes literally out of the ground. I mean, we're at the very beginning where this river actually begins. It literally bubbles out of the ground. It is the melting snow from Mount Hermon that goes down, takes about 8 to 12 months to percolate, and then comes up out of the water, and that's where it begins at Caesarea Philippi. And the Syrians were wanting to divert that major water source.
Yes.
And that ultimately was some of the beginning controversy. But one of the things with regards to the 1967 border, which some people say Israel ought to go back to the 1967 border, that would mean that all of the Golan Heights and all the way down to Galilee would be turned over to Syria, that very strategic area. And when you're there physically seeing it, you realize how much of a suicidal mission that would be for Israel. If you turned over that land to the radical Islamic regimes, Israel would literally be committing suicide.
Yes, that's true. That's so true.
Now, we walked around a lot of different places as we're traveling from the Galilee down to the newly opened baptismal site where Jordan is. One of the things I think that struck a lot of people, and maybe it did you as well, is that's where the children of Israel crossed the Jordan. And it's also where John the Baptist baptized Jesus.
Yes.
So Jesus did things not just haphazardly, but he was actually being baptized in the place where the children of Israel, when they came into the Promised Land, crossed the Jordan. He was in that location being baptized.
That's true. And I believe for most of us that stood there and looked at those waters were just greatly moved with that information. It was new news to me that it was at that exact location. And it just greatly impacted my life knowing that God's children crossed at that very site, and then hundreds of years later, then Christ was baptized in those very waters. And not only that, we were standing on Israel ground, and literally just a few feet from us, on the other side of the bank, was Jordan.
Yeah, you could throw a rock literally from one side and hit the other side, and that's Jordan, because it's a very narrow place at that location. Then we went to Jerusalem, and we spent time there. And there's not time to catalog everything that we did there, but going to the Garden of Gethsemane, where there literally is an olive tree that dates back 2,000 years. It's a time that would have gone back to the time when Jesus went to the garden hours before his crucifixion, and he prayed with his disciples. And then from there, we went into the city and went down to the very first century floor where the games are still carved into the stone that the Roman soldiers would be playing, and they would be playing games, as we know, as to who is going to get the seamless garment of Jesus. And those games are still carved into the very first century floor. But I want to talk about one other experience that we did, and there's so many of them, and that's going to the city of David. Tell us about that experience for you. That
was perhaps the icing on the cake for me for this trip. It was our last visit of the 2-week journey, and I really did not anticipate the Lord just really touching my heart as he did in that visit. I thought perhaps it was just going to be another historical site. But as we walked through the very tunnel that was dug out for the very base of the pathway that Jesus walked during his time. Not only that, it was the very road that was built for the first temple and that we walked on. I just had an overwhelming heart experience that the Lord said, these are the paths that my children walk as they were walking toward my very presence, going to the temple, to the Holy of Holies. And this very earth that your feet are on was that path. And not only that, Christ then came and walked along that same very path that led him ultimately to his very death. And it was perhaps an experience that I'll never forget.
It was amazing. It's where the Isaiah was written. It's where Jeremiah was written. It's where Jeremiah was thrown into the pit. It's where the city of David began. It's where this underground tunnel, water tunnel that connects the Pool of Siloam with the temple was. We had a chance to walk there. 6 meters above us is the road that goes right along the temple wall. And there's a lot of places where you say, well, Jesus may have been here, Jesus may have been there. We walked on the very road, going back to the first century, that Jesus and others, but Jesus obviously would have been walking on this road, going to the temple, right up to the very temple. It's a phenomenal experience. I encourage you, if you've never been to Israel, but even if you have, there's no other trip like going on the Liberty Ambassador Counsel program. It literally will strengthen your Christian faith and equip you and energize you to become a goodwill ambassador for Israel. Call us today at 1-800-671-1776 or visit us at lc.org.
You have been listening to Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. We hope that we have motivated you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedoms. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email updates. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.